but the rest of the platforms are working great as far as I know. So we'll have comments and we'll have a show on Memorial Day weekend when all the lazy people are off on vacation. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the highlight of human civilization. It's called Coffee with Scott Adams, and you've never had a better time. But if you'd like to take your experience up to levels that nobody can understand with their tiny, shiny human brains, all you need for that is a cup or a mug or a glass, a tankard, chalice or stein, a canteen jug or flask, a vessel of any kind. Fill it with your favorite liquid. I like coffee. And join me now for the unparalleled pleasure of the dopamine hit of the day, the thing that makes everything better. It's called the simultaneous sip. It happens now. Go. So I'm going to ask a favor from one of the commenters. One of you puts the entire simultaneous sip with the wording in the comments when I'm doing it. Don't do that because it's a long block which distracts me. So I know you're trying to help, but it's really distracting when you put it in there as I'm talking about it because it makes me look and say, "Oh, what's this long block of text?" It's probably something important. So if you could, don't do that anymore. Thank you. It would be hard to know that was a problem, so don't worry about it. Well, if the X platform is working after the show, Owen Gregorian will be hosting his Spaces, again, a Coffee with Scott Adams after party. But it probably depends highly on whether the X platform is back online. And if not, maybe it gets pushed to the next day. But that's the current thinking. Well, if you happen to hate the New York Knicks, that would be a basketball team. You've had a good week. I know most of you are not into basketball, but I just have to tell you about how the Indiana Pacers beat the Knicks because it's not even a sports story. It's like the biggest coincidence in the world story. So it was the game before this last one, and the Knicks were up by 2, and time was running out. And one of the better players on the Indiana Pacers takes this long, desperate 3-point shot. If it goes in, which was highly unlikely, the Pacers would win. If it missed, the Knicks would win. So you're watching it go, and it's really high and it's really far away, and it hits the rim, and it misses. And the Knicks are like, yes, we won the first game of this playoff. And then because the ball had come from a long distance, when it hit the rim, it went up in the air for a very long distance as well. And when it came down, it went right through the hoop. It was something you would rarely ever see. Now, since it was a 3-point shot, the Pacers are like, yes, we won because we were only down by 2, and we just made a 3-point shot. And then they look at the video, and the guy who shot it, his foot was just on the line, which makes it a 2-point shot. So first the Knicks totally won, then the Pacers totally won, and then it was a tie. And had to go to overtime where the Pacers won. So if you were a Knicks fan, it was a terrible week. And I guess they lost another tight one. All right, I'm going to give you a movie recommendation or a movie review, I guess. So I don't know where it is except on Amazon Prime Video, but it's called The Fountain of Youth. It's brand new, and it features John Krasinski and Natalie Portman, I think, as his sister, and they play these Indiana Jones kind of characters. Now, here's what's great about this movie. Apparently, I'm just guessing. My guess is that the director had some kind of deal with the production studio that he could make the movie any way he wanted to. And he made it old-fashioned-y. And you don't notice it at first. You just think you're watching a movie. Excuse me. Hold on. But at some point, you realize, hey, there was nobody tied to a chair. Hey, there was no gratuitous like sex scene or those terrible scenes where somebody's showing their love to somebody else and you're like, I get it, I get it. You know, all the things that you hate in a movie, it just simply didn't have them. It was like a wisecracking action movie. So the wisecracking was great because John Krasinski's great at wisecracking, and the characters were great. But then you notice um, it did have one thing that I don't like in a movie, which is somebody who's underwater for too long. I fast forward through all underwater scenes. But then you realize, wait a minute, there's nothing woke about this movie. The cast is not diverse. There's no overweight black woman who's the key feature. It's just good-looking people, and the two female leads were both attractive, and the lead guy was attractive too. So, when was the last time you saw a movie like that? There was nothing woke at all. I don't know how he got it made. I would love to know the backstory. Was it Guy Ritchie? It's a Guy Ritchie film. So, and it's fun for the whole family. There's no swearing. I think there was zero swearing, and basically, it was sort of a genius movie of what he left out. He just sort of left out everything that movies try to put in there. You know, all the stuff you don't want to see. So I recommend it. Fun for the whole family. Well, in other news, according to SciPost, non-right-handedness is more common across multiple mental health conditions. You know what non-right-handedness is? It's called left-handedness. So apparently, if you're left-handed, you're more likely to have a variety of mental health conditions. Now, that probably includes if you're a leftist, because you know how we've already seen that the Democrats have more mental health problems, and they're actually called leftists. So apparently, anything left is correlated with mental health problems. Anyway, in other news, according to Discover, we tend to trust people from low-income backgrounds over the wealthy elites. Do you think that's true? Do you trust people from low-income backgrounds more than rich people? I think that depends. If you dropped your wallet, would you rather a billionaire found it or somebody from a low-income background? I feel like I trust the billionaire to give my wallet back. So that's very situation dependent. But you can see why Joe Biden used to do, I'm just lunch pail Joe. I take the train. I'm just like you. Anyway, according to some, let's say, neuroscience news, AI has higher emotional IQ than humans. You know, the emotional IQ where, you know how to deal with people's emotional states and your own, etc. And I thought to myself, that kind of makes sense because the AI can simply memorize all the situations, and it can just say, all right, under this situation, people should do this. So, yes, it makes total sense that AI would have a higher emotional IQ. Could have just asked me. And it's a big deal. Actually, it's a big difference. The AI achieved an average score of 82%, where the humans were at 56%. So, so if you want some empathy and you want a high emotional IQ, I suggest you get a robot. Robots can set you free. According to Fox News, the ladies of The View have been asked by their boss, the head of Disney, Bob Iger, to cool it with all the political chatter. And then apparently the ladies of The View said, no, it's very important that we do political chatter. So we'll keep doing it. I don't know if that was a good idea, because if your boss tells you to do less of something, you probably should do less of it. But I can't believe that The View has the same ratings when they're being political and essentially annoying half of the country. Don't you think their ratings would be higher if they just did everything but politics? So it seems like Bob Iger may have the right idea here, but who knows? If you haven't seen this yet, there's some kind of AI called VO3, in which they created a bunch of deep fake street interviews. So it's a whole bunch of little clips where somebody's interviewing somebody in the street, usually at night. And until now, I always told myself, I could tell AI from reality, but you can't. It's not even just one or two things. It's a whole string of street interviews, and you cannot tell that these are AI. So I don't know how far away we are from making a whole movie, but that was scary. So we've crossed the Scott line, where I say to myself, I could tell that was AI because they have 6 fingers, or there's something about them, or the way they talk. You absolutely can't tell. It 100% looks real. Crazy. Meanwhile, speaking of crazy and crazy eyes, Hillary Clinton is trying to ruin your Memorial Day weekend because she's made the following suggestion in a post on X. She said, I want you to talk to 2 people, friends, neighbors, cookout attendees, about why Trump's proposed budget would be a disaster for American kids. And then she goes on to give some examples of what she's talking about. Can you think of a worse idea than bringing up the budget at your Memorial Day barbecue? I can't think of a worse idea. Does Hillary get invited to things? She talks like somebody who's never been invited to anything. It's the worst idea of all time. No. How about you just shut up about politics and enjoy your neighbors and your family? Shut up. Just shut up about politics. Yeah, take a message from Bob Iger. Sometimes talking about politics could be too much. Meanwhile, according to the College Fix, a Tennessee university is hit with civil rights complaints over 17 race-based scholarships. So when they say race-based, it means you can't be a white guy, basically. But some of them are more specific, like you could be an African American or a I think Native American or something. So some of them will give you 2 choices. Oh yeah, Native American or African American. So there's 17 race-based scholarships. I'm kind of happy that that stuff's being dismantled, but don't you think it'll be put right back together as soon as Trump is out of office? Don't you imagine that the minute there's a Democrat who's president, that everything that Trump has dismantled will just go right back to the way it was? Or could it be that the Democrats are happy he's dismantling it, but they can't say it out loud? I don't know. I want to be happy about the direction of things, but I don't know how long it's going to last. Well, Kamala Harris, according to that new book by Jake Tapper, some time ago when she was appearing on CNN, and I think it was after Biden did his catastrophic debate performance. And she goes on CNN and she was asked about basically Biden's brain. And then she gets off and she allegedly blasted Anderson Cooper as a mother effer. What? Oh. So the story is that she was very mad about the question she was asked about the president's cognitive ability. And she said, this MFer, she used the actual full word, this MFer doesn't treat me like the damn vice president of the United States, she told colleagues. And then she said, I thought we were better than that. Well, don't you think they were treating her like the vice president of the United States? Because the vice president of the United States, under the condition of the president of the United States showing that he's cognitively impaired, isn't it exactly her job to figure out whether the 25th Amendment makes sense? To me, it seems like they were treating her like the vice president. She would be the number one person you should ask that question. Is it time to replace this guy? So I guess she didn't like having any tough questions. But don't you feel lucky that she didn't become president? We were so close to having a president, Kamala Harris. The horse laugh. Oh my God. Well, Victor Davis Hanson was talking about CNN and all the things that they've done that were opposite of news. And some of the things he listed was he actually went so hard as to say he doesn't know how Jake Tapper is keeping his job at CNN, because he mentions Victor mentions the Russia collusion fail, the Steele dossier fail, the Hunter laptop fail. And he says there's definitely a pattern, to which I would like to add the following. What about the fine people hoax? What about the whole auto pen story? There was nobody in the news business who knew there was an auto pen problem. What about the Biden crime family? Totally ignored. What about the drinking bleach hoax? Yeah, there's a pattern. But the pattern all comes from the same place, doesn't it? The pattern comes from they created a narrative that Trump was Hitler. Once you've created the narrative that Trump is Hitler, it gives you permission to lie about every story, because obviously you don't want to be complicit in making Hitler in charge. So basically there was one problem that caused them to no longer be a news entity, and it was that they had convinced themselves that he was Hitler. So one problem caused 50 problems. According to Liz Peek, who's writing for The Hill, they're still trying to figure out who is in charge of that auto pen, which is kind of hilarious because it's one of the biggest, well, maybe the biggest story in the country. Don't you think if the biggest story in the country was who's doing all that auto pen stuff, don't you think that the people who were doing the auto pen stuff should have said, "Oh, that was me. Yeah, it was the three of us. This was our process." But without that, what are we supposed to think? There's only one thing you could think if they decided to get real quiet about that process. There's a problem. Because if there were no problem, it would have been like day 2. They would have said, "Oh, here's how it works. Here's the process. Here's our diary of, who did what and who signed it." The fact that they're just quiet about it and that we have to do research to figure out who was behind the auto pen, that's a pretty good indication that there's a problem. But the thing that to me is scary is that there are 2 people who were mentioned as, likely not the only people necessarily, but 2 of the main people who might have been behind the auto pen. And what's scary is I'd never heard of them. If the real answer had been Ron Klain or Jake Sullivan, I would have said, that's not ideal because the president's supposed to be doing the auto pen stuff. But at least I would think, this is a well-known, smart person. Everybody's heard those names. But the names we're hearing are Mike Donnellan and Anita Dunn. How many of you had ever heard those names before the auto pen thing? Isn't that like giving you a little pause? It's like, I'm not so sure who they even are. So part of the mystery is, why do people we've never even heard of were signing all these things? And then there's the thought about all the clemencies. Weren't there like thousands of clemencies that were signed? And you thought to yourself, how could thousands of them being signed? Well, the auto pen. Do you think anybody sold a clemency? I'll bet they did. I'll bet somebody sold a clemency or 2. Don't know who. So Susan Rice, you know her from the sort of Obama person. So she did a little video. I don't know what she was appearing on, but she was saying that Trump has only looked at 12 daily briefings in over 100 days of being in office. And the way she says it with her wrinkled up eyebrows is that it's like he's not doing the job. He's only seen 12 daily briefings, only 12 in over 100 days. Now, she says it in a way that she's trying to sell the attitude, not the facts, because the facts don't really tell a story, but the attitude, she scrunches up her face so that it's a really big problem. But here's my interpretation. What would be the second reason that Trump would not be listening to all the daily briefings? I'm going to take a sip while you answer that question. What would be the other reason that he had only listened to some of the briefings? What would you say? The answer is that he had determined that they're bullshit. If they were useful, don't you think he would listen to them? Of course he would. I remember that the daily briefing included the bin Laden risk. And I think Bush didn't even pay attention to it because it was just on a list of a whole bunch of things. And I also wonder if the daily briefing is maybe managed a little bit by some Obama people who have gotten to some other people who can get to some other people. Don't you think that Susan Rice is a little bit too interested in the daily briefings? As if maybe the Democrats have figured out how to influence somebody who does the daily briefings for the president, and they're trying to manipulate him that way, but he's just not paying attention to them at all. Maybe. Well, General Mike Flynn, who of course has seen daily briefings, he said the daily briefings is a complete waste of time, financial resources, and people. He said Rice is another Marxist who sees globalism as the future. And I say, if you can't trust government employees to give you the right stuff, who can you trust? Well, Senator Joni Ernst is talking about something. I think you heard this from Elon and Doge at one point, that there are $60 billion spent on federal government credit cards. And apparently there are twice as many credit cards as there are federal government employees. That's a little red flag right there. Twice as many credit cards as employees. But apparently it's worse than that. Because she says that a lot of the card usage occurs during federal holidays and on days like New Year's Eve at nightclubs and bars and Sunday afternoons and whenever there's a big UFC fight. And there are also cash withdrawals at casino ATMs. So I guess they canceled about 500,000 of those cards. I think you've heard that story before. But the funny part is that it's so obvious that they were stealing because you could tell the pattern of when the cards were being used. Well, Trump has threatened the European Union with a 50% tariff because they seem to be dragging their feet, dealing with the trade stuff. And part of it is that it's complicated. So it's not just tariffs. It's they got fees on streaming services, value-added taxes. They got automotive regulations and fines imposed against U.S. companies and antitrust. So it's a lot of stuff to untangle. So Trump's just saying, all right, take your time, but we're going to give you a 50% tariff. I kind of like that. Wall Street Journal's reporting that. Well, according to one source I saw it on a post by Luke Groman, that if all Chinese students were removed from all U.S. colleges, most of them would go bankrupt because the Chinese students pay full price for tuition, and the colleges need that. So if we remove all the Chinese students from all the colleges, besides just Harvard, a lot of colleges would go out of business. But don't you think we're heading toward a situation where a lot of colleges need to go out of business because they're not really adding enough value? Once you have AI, it seems like you can make your own college. So I'm not too worried about that. Trump says U.S. Steel will partner with Nippon Steel. Is it Nippon? Nippon? And remain in the United States, headquartered in Pittsburgh. And it's going to create 70,000 jobs and add 15 or 14 billion to the economy. Yeah, that sounds good. Sounds good. We're going to have more steel and fewer Chinese students. Now, I do worry that some of the foreign students would be, highly value added to our tech situation in this country. But I do think we got a lot of them. So maybe we could have fewer. Well, Texas has decided, it's on the verge of, it hasn't done it yet, of completely banning THC products. And so Tim Walz, governor of Minneapolis, Minnesota, governor of Minnesota, right? So Tim Walz weighs in because Texas might ban THC, And he says in a post on X, Texans, flee the nanny state and come up north to enjoy the land of the free. And I'm thinking to myself, Tim Walz just came out publicly in favor of smoking weed in his state? Okay. I like him a little bit better now. He's got that one thing going for him. Well, according to John Bolton, there's no such thing as a South African white genocide. And he apparently, you know, that video of the what we were told is the South Africans singing, "Kill the farmers, kill the shoot the Afrikaners." And it was one of the main pieces of evidence that Trump was showing the president of South Africa. Apparently, those were not even South Africans. It was video from the Republic of the Congo. Now, that's what Reuters is saying. It was a clip grabbed from Reuters, and it wasn't even South Africans. But I do wonder if there are any South Africans who are doing that song and that dance. But I don't know what to believe about South Africa anymore. So John Bolton basically says, there's just so much crime there and, murder that, of course, the white farmers are getting murdered because everybody's getting murdered. They're just part of the getting murdered crowd, but they're not specifically being targeted. I don't know about that. So John Bolton is not exactly the best source for really anything. He's usually wrong on all the important everything. But if the white South Africans believe there's a genocide, wouldn't they be the best source? They're not making it up, right? The ones who want to get out of there because it's too dangerous? Yeah. Seems like it's unlikely that it's fake. Well, David Hogg, you know him, the co-chair of the DNC. He says that Representative Jasmine Crockett is the type of leader that they need because the Democratic Party is rudderless. Rudderless. A rudder would be the thing that dangles down under the boat. You know what they are? Is they are rudderless, but they're also penisless and scrotumless. But David Hogg says, I love her. She's amazing. I think that people want to see somebody who fights and calls out the bull, the BS, ultimately. He was talking to Charlemagne the God. I think that's what Jasmine does. Do you think he's called it right? Do you think he's got his finger on the pulse? Do you think what the Democrats need more than anything is a angry black woman who can yell a lot? or is he just being sort of a DEI guy and he wants to make sure he's backing her? I feel like Jasmine Crockett is what the Republicans want for the Democrats. She might be the worst spokesperson that the Democrats have ever had. And I love the fact that David Hogg has to embrace her. Oh, well, good luck with that, guys. According to The Conversation, and this is based on some Australians, I think. Oh, wait, yeah. Authors are not happy about AI using their work, even if they get paid. So I guess a bunch of Australian authors have weighed in, and they don't like at all that AI might be trained on their work. Now, does that surprise you? So I went to Grok, and I said, Grok, are the sales of nonfiction books going down since AI? Because that would be the way you'd know. If people felt they didn't need to read nonfiction books because they could just ask Grok and it's already read all the books. And Grok was very, very vague. Grok was a little bit, there is a little bit of a decrease in that market, but you can't really tie that to AI because you have lots of different factors happening. To which I thought, oh my God, is AI covering its own tracks? It looks like AI is coming up with its own alibis. Well, it's not the AI, it's a variety of factors that would be hard to measure. I don't know. I'm going to say that that's an open question. But here's my prediction. My prediction is that nonfiction books will continue to decrease in sales, and it will be because of AI eventually. All right, well, it's a holiday weekend. There's not much going on. So can anybody tell me if the X platform is working? Can you give me an update in the comments? I know there'll be a little time lag here. But is the X platform working? Because if it is, then Owen can do his spaces because there's not much going on today. I probably have a little less content today because a lot of it comes from X. Oh, it's not working, Erica says. Damn it. So, Owen, does that mean you won't be trying to do his spaces? Because I doubt the spaces would work if the platform's down. All right, well, if it's not working today, Owen says he'll move it to tomorrow. But I'm seeing authoritatively that it's glitching. Okay. Owen says he'll give it a shot and see how it goes. All right. So he's going to give it a shot. And I'm going to end early because there's not much going on. But you can go to Owen's Spaces, and if it works, you can get a lot more. And thanks for joining, everybody. I'm going to say a few words to the locals people privately, but for the rest of you, enjoy your Saturday.